Today's episode is brought to you by FreedomProject Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello everyone, I'm David Fiorazzo, joined by Katie Petrick. Before we get started, please hit that share button so we can educate more patriots around the country. Today, we start with a startling new documentary. We both watched the whole thing, it's amazing. It exposes the radical doctors, psychiatrists, and professors working hard to indoctrinate the next generation that gender doesn't exist. It's an amazing documentary Matt Walsh did. I just give him a lot of credit for going out on the street, talking to people, interviewing people, everyone from doctors to college professors to people in, I think, Southern California. It was absolutely astounding, and you want to laugh at sometimes, but then you realize what you're laughing at, and you're thinking, Katie, this is really sad.
This is really sad.
But it's so bizarre and crazy that you almost have to laugh.
And so this documentary, it's called What is a Woman? And the whole purpose is for Matt Walsh to go actually internationally. He goes to Africa as well as being all around the United States, and he asks the simple question, what is a woman?
At what age does the medical transition begin with medication?
So medical affirmation begins when the patient says they're ready for it. So that could be a kiddo who is just starting puberty and panicking because they're getting breast buds or their penis is getting bigger and busier and they're worried about all kinds of masculine changes. And that way, puberty blockers, which are completely reversible and don't have permanent effects, are wonderful because we can put that pause on puberty. Just like if you were listening to music, you put the pause on and we stop the blockers and puberty would go right back to where it was. The next note in the song just delayed that period of time.
You can just pause puberty.
No, you can't.
And then pick it up.
No, you can't.
In the future.
No, you can't. How many studies do they have, long-term studies, on hormone blockers with children? None.
I just spoke a month or two ago with a mother whose 14-year-old daughter was put on blockers. They discovered after 2 years, this 14-year-old girl has osteoporosis. That's something that like old women get.
How can doctors assure parents that a certain medicine is totally safe if, based on what you're saying, they can't possibly know that?
How can they be removing the healthy breasts of 15-year-old girls? How can they be sterilizing kids? How can this whole thing be happening, Matt?
And
good question.
That's the great question. Now, just so everyone's aware, What is a Woman was produced by the Daily Wire, and it's exclusive to the Daily Wire. So we both can't recommend enough you going out and getting a paid membership to the Daily Wire just to see this, because this movie, this documentary, it's an hour and a half. It just came out. It just speaks to everything that is happening in our country right now. And if we can't answer what is a woman, how can we have a society?
So let's talk about a few people that were in the documentary that you just saw the clip of. But Katie, before we do that, you brought up the African tribe. Mm-hmm. This was one of the most amazing parts. As soon as he went overseas, as soon as he went out to a tribe that wasn't, I guess, culturized or whatever, or civilized, quote unquote, these are the people that couldn't grasp the concept that a man could be a woman or a woman could be a man. They could not, they laughed. It was nervous laughter when Matt Walsh was asking these questions through a translator, and they looked and they laughed when he said, could a man be a woman? And that was one of the most fascinating parts that made you go, okay, this is really happening in America.
This is an American.
This is an American thing, construct. So your thoughts on that tribe? That was fascinating.
And we don't want to spoil too much, but basically,
come on.
Matt,
it was a long documentary.
This is true. Matt did ask, okay, so does that make you then want to come to America? And they kind of laughed again, like, why would I go somewhere where a man doesn't know what his role is and a woman doesn't even know what a woman is? So no. And they were everyone was perfectly okay with knowing what a man and a woman are, not what we have going on today. And yeah, I did find that whole section of the movie to be quite fascinating. But some of the people you just saw, the experts, if you will, the experts,
quote unquote,
that very first woman, Dr. Michelle Forcier, she's a pediatrician, but also she calls herself an abortionist and worked for Planned Parenthoods for like a couple decades. So she's a great person. But she knows all about medical affirmation, right? Like that's what she does, is this thing called medical affirmation.
That's right. And Matt Walsh asked, at what age is it appropriate? And you're talking about children being affirmed by a parent, a teacher, a counselor. And she says a medical affirmation begins when the patient, meaning a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 8-year-old, says they're ready to change genders, right? So that was one takeaway there, and that was Dr. Michelle Forcier. Mm-hmm. And she also, there's lies. There's direct lies saying that their puberty blockers are completely reversible. Have there been studies on that, Katie?
Absolutely not. And what you saw, the whole thing talking about the studies is coming from a trans man. You saw Scott Nugent,
yes.
who has very many regrets. And this is the part of the documentary where you're going to watch and your heart's just going to sink for what has happened to Scott. Scott has 3 children and switched when like 40 some years old. And at one point says, if they got me like at 42 or something like that, what about your children? They have no chance. And absolute regrets of switching from female to male. And Scott is saying, you know, how many studies have there been? 0. We don't know. And for that Dr. Michelle Forcier to say, oh, it's just like a song on the radio, or you know, you just hit pause. So you're 11-year-old, you start taking puberty blockers, you hit pause on that child. Guess what? That 11-year-old decides 3 years later, wait a minute, I'm not actually a boy. I really am a girl. Like, yeah, my body tells me I am. Okay, resume. You just resume, and now everyone else is like 14 years old, and you're still an 11-year-old body trying to catch up. Is that sound like something we should be doing to our children? Let's just hit pause, and it's like playing a song. It's a song and dance for them.
So Walt Heyer is one that's not in the video, but sexchangeregret, I believe.com. He's one that's put out a lot of great information on this. But she calls these things safe, it's reversible, and just what you and I would consider lies. But so Matt Walsh goes out on the street to one of these women marches. I guess it was the Planned Parenthood thing. And there were actually young girls, I'd say teenagers, wearing T-shirts that said, hey, vote women in, or I support womanhood, or whatever. And he asked them, so what is a woman? None of them could answer the question.
They can't.
Wanted to, and they kind of looked at each other like, is it cool? We want to be woke. We don't want to answer the question because it might put us on the spot. This was actually astounding to me.
Well, and what's astounding to me is we know that at the K-12 level, these teachers are trying to get our children to be confused and want to be put on puberty blockers. But hey, it starts at the college level too, where we have all this smugness of all the smug you can possibly have. And in the documentary, Matt actually talked to a Dr. Patrick Grzonka, who's a professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies for the University of Tennessee. And in true professoriate type fashion, instead of answering any question that Matt said, he just said, well, what do you think? And he just circular. Look at him. He's just, well, when you say truth, what do you think I mean? Or what do you think you mean by truth? And he could not answer a question, and he got offended by the word truth.
Yeah, he actually threatened to stop the interview with Matt Walsh when he said, Walsh, you're evoking the word truth, like you're using truth as a weapon. Matt just says, I just want reality and truth. And so the professor's saying, well, it's your reality or your truth. This is absolutely amazing when you're talking about college professors, but this is where we are.
And there was a whole conversation about female chickens and
That's
whatever.
right.
But we're going to leave that up to you to go out and watch Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman?
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
All right, before we move on, please do take just one little moment to consider supporting the work we do here at Freedom Project. If you do enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club with a donation. And as just a little token of our appreciation, we will send you our trademark American Patriot tumbler. Simply visit patriotclub.us to show your support for us. That's patriotclub.us. All right, in the next story, we're going to be talking about England, where we have a mother named Clara Janes and a father named Matt Stubbings, who had twins. Yay, congrats to them. About 4 years ago, and they had a boy named Arlo and they had a girl named Emerald. Well, now Emerald, the girl, wants to be identified as a boy, and according to mom and dad, this started happening when Emerald was about 2.5 years old. And so now both the twins are 4 years old, and Emerald goes by the name of Stormy. And they actually posted about it on Twitter, and they were interviewed, over by the media over in England. Just take a look about what they had to say.
On the 6th of March, we welcomed our beautiful twins into the world. A boy called Arlo and a girl called Emerald.
The first one they said was, "This is a girl." I can remember your face just like lighting up like, "This is amazing." And then the next one is on, "This is a boy." It was like jackpot, one of each. This is the perfect combination here.
Yeah, look at Daddy flipping. So now they're 4 years old and they identify as two boys. The first time that I realised Stormy wanted to identify as male was about roughly 2.5, but it's not really, he said, "I want to be a boy." He said, "I am a boy," and that is the difference.
My name is Stormy and I'm 4 years old. I feel like a boy and I want to be a boy. Sometimes people call me girl.
Do they? How does that make you feel?
Sad.
I can't remember the exact moment it switched over, but there was that point where I thought, you know what, this isn't just a phase. This is not a little girl we're looking at here, it's a little boy. He started being unhappy with being dressed as a girl, so he started being unhappy with wearing dresses. Hair clips were a big no-no, didn't like hair clips, didn't like the pigtails. He was genuinely upset at being dressed as a girl.
Now, that is coming straight from mom and dad's voices, but you also heard a little bit from Stormy there. So this is an interesting story because we're talking about a twin boy and girl, and this started when they were 2.5 and now they're 4, and Stormy identifies as a boy. And mom and dad, I will say this, mom and dad, when watching them in another news interview, are a lot more cautious, I will say, than most of these parents. And that gives me, I guess, I don't know, hope for parents trying to take serious what's addressing issues their children are having. However, they are still affirming that Stormy is a boy.
I think what's very telling is when the dad said, "I can't remember the exact moment, it switched over." What's it? What? All of a sudden it switched? All of a sudden you saw a light go off when your child was 2? This is just really, depressing. But another quote in here, I think of this is the story of Jazz Jennings all over again. He started being unhappy, being dressed as a girl. Now Jazz was the opposite. No, wait a minute. Yeah, Jazz was a male, right? Jazz Jennings is a male, and now he is identifies as a female. He started being unhappy being dressed as a girl, so he started being happy wearing dresses. Hair clips were a big no-no. Didn't like hair clips, didn't like pigtails. He was genuinely upset as being dressed as a girl. So for those observations, Is that enough evidence or enough information to go on to say, okay, I think he's the wrong gender?
Here's what I'll say about this. Okay, so I had 2 older brothers. I more so was dressing like a boy when I was younger. I was a tomboy. Okay, back then, puberty blockers weren't a consideration, or my parents didn't even remotely think, well, clearly she's meant to be a boy. I hated wearing dresses. I hated doing anything that was stereotypical.
You probably
of a girl.
like sports.
I love sports. But at the same time, my parents didn't, I guess, buy into, well, that obviously wants to be a boy, identifies as a boy, must be a boy. In this day and age, it's way too easy for parents to be like, well, everyone else's kid is doing it. Clearly that means my kid is whatever gender they claim to be. Now, the main situation that I read in this story, and Mom keeps saying, and I hope Mom keeps this up, is that she asks, are you a boy today, or do you feel like you might be a girl today? It's at least acknowledging and trying to get into that kid's head that you are actually a female. Now, Mom and Dad, whatever you do, make it so you do not give that kid puberty blockers, unlike what we see in What is a Woman by Matt Walsh.
Yeah.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Well, I guess I have to ask, would you like some fries with a side of gender politics?
No, please.
Oh, well, then I guess you can't go to a K-12 school because now that is the order. See what I did there?
Yeah,
that is the order for all K-12 schools. The Biden administration, through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, this makes perfectly no sense, has announced that in order for all these K-12 schools to get any federal funding for their lunch programs, their breakfast, their snack programs, everything else, boys must be allowed into girls' bathrooms. As if eating school lunches by those boys and having tummy troubles in just the boys' room wasn't enough, now they're going to take those tummy troubles into the girls' bathroom because that's how woke we are. This was announced via a press release called USDA Promotes Program Access, Combats Discrimination Against LGBTQI plus Community. The USDA. The U.S. Department of Agriculture now must put their gender politics in instead of just serving your kids school lunch.
Wow. So I want to ask you, do you think, Mom and Dad watching at home, do you think we'll hear any pushback from maybe poor communities or inner city parents? Because kids, this affects their lunch, their ability to get lunch money?
Yep.
It's
their money. They're taking their lunch money.
This is really amazing. Well, it's not amazing that the Biden administration is pushing. I thought they overplayed their hand, but what we're learning, I think, Katie, is they are not going to stop. They're not going to relent on this agenda. So we've got to just keep on raising awareness about this, because now you're talking about just really affecting kids' health, the ability to eat a meal for free at school, so the boy can go and change or go to the bathroom in the girls' bathroom.
Yep, and this is coming from Secretary Tom Vilsack, who said that the USDA is committed to administering all its programs with equity and fairness, and serving those in need with the highest dignity. A key step in advancing these principles is rooting out discrimination in any form, including discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Did you notice how that's actually the only thing they say? It's always gender and sex for them. It can't just be about the chicken nuggets. At the same time, we must recognize the vulnerability of the LGBTQI plus communities and provide them with an avenue to grieve any discrimination they face. We hope that by standing firm against these inequities, we will help bring about much needed change. Again, I say to you, this is the USDA who is going to withhold money from these K-12 schools for lunch money so your children can eat if you don't affirm that boys can go in the girls' bathrooms, because it's all about equity to them. And so it means that if you do accept any federal food funding, you're going to be stuck. I mean, food stamps, again, you're talking about the poorest of the poor. This includes those who accept food stamps. It means that the males can go in female spaces because we're all about equity. So every single K-12 school, what do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to be like, oh, no, I guess we can't feed the children. Oh, let's just let the boys go in the bathroom. That's what they're going to do.
Well, we want to wrap it up with a quote here. The Federalist emailed a statement. It says, organizations may request a religious exemption by submitting a declaration to the Secretary of Agriculture that has control over the kids' meals, like in the public schools, identifying the provisions that conflict with a specific tenet of the religious organization. So that's what you have to do, you jump through hoops in order to combat this.
But that's the thing is you actually, according to Title IX, you don't have to jump through hoops, but they're making it seem like you have to jump through hoops. So they're not actually, they're trying to make it seem like you don't have to opt in.
Yeah.
Or you do have to opt in, that you don't have to opt out, but they're saying that you have to opt out. They're lying to you. Moral of the story, lies.
Government. All right, coming up next before we go. All right, before we go, let's take a little time to fill you in on some other stories we've been following. Since today's show has been focused on gender, the madness, it seems only fitting that we discuss a new doll being unveiled to empower children who've been convinced to believe they're a different sex. Roderick Laverne Cox, known as Laverne Cox, is celebrating 50 years on this planet by partnering with Mattel to create something nobody asked for, a transgender Barbie doll. Watch this.
I was like, I want her to have multiple outfits, and they said to make it cost effective so people can afford it, it's $40 retail, we can only do one outfit. But I was like, what if we have an outfit that peels off? So this bustier comes off, and then the dress underneath comes off, so you can mix and match the style. And I love her, and I had so much fun collaborating with everyone at Mattel designing her. But I think this year particularly, when over 250 pieces of anti-transgender legislation have been introduced in state legislatures all over the country, targeting transgender children, LGBTQ youth, that I hope all the kids who are feeling stigmatized when their health care is being jeopardized, their ability to play in sports, I hope they can see this Barbie and have a sense of hope and possibility. If they don't see themselves in this Barbie, I hope they know that they can create spaces where they do see themselves.
Healthcare jeopardized. And anyway, Cox said the transgender Barbie doll, $40? This, of course, becomes one more way for the LGBT to reach kids at younger and younger ages. We talk about this all the time. Speaking of pushing agendas, a high school in Massachusetts recently held a bake sale. Prepare for this, guys, to benefit Planned Parenthood. What did they bake, you ask? Well, watch, look at this. Well, they decided to make vagina cupcakes as a way of normalizing female anatomy. Now, a sign advertising the bake sale says the male anatomy is constantly joked about, while female anatomy is portrayed with disgust or seen as too private. Buy a $5 cupcake to normalize female anatomy. Now, the real question is, why are high school students allowed to raise money for a tax-funded, multi-billion-dollar left-wing organization that helps kill more than 1 million babies a year? Katie, your thoughts?
Well, first off, you already found out that I don't like Barbie dolls to begin with. I threw them in the back of my closet, so I'm saving that $40. I also don't like cupcakes, so I don't see any issues with what these stories are because I'm not participating based on principle. But based on whoever baked those, I don't want to eat that. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Just know.
Yeah.
But this is what we call education now and what's acceptable.
In schools, that's right. Finally, this segment has been all about women. Or men who pretend they're women. So let's wrap things up with another woman who brings a whole new meaning to the Mile High Club. 23-year-old Sarah Rodo loves planes. In fact, she loves planes so much she is sexually attracted to them. No, seriously. It's called Objectum sexual, meaning she's sexually attracted to inanimate objects. We've heard stories of this. But anyway, Sarah says she flies on... Sorry. She flies on aircraft as often as possible, has 50 replica models of a 737, which she calls her boyfriend, and hopes to one day marry a plane if Germany changes its pesky laws. Not to worry, though, this sexual attraction to planes will probably fly away, as she claims to have been previously in love with a train. Katie, do I see this coming? Planes, trains, and
automobiles.
Part trans.
Yes, that sounds just about right.
Okay. All right, we've got to wrap up this segment, but guaranteed more to come next time.
And I guess that's going to do it for this show. For all of us here at Freedom Project, stay educated, my friends.